Hi, I'm Bronwen, the Executive Director of Data for Change. We're a non-profit organisation based in London that works at the intersection of data, design, journalism and tech. I'm a New Zealander, but I'm living in London. I love spreadsheets almost as much as I love board games, but secretly my true passion is binge watching trashy TV. Data for Change is most known in the design and data viz community for our 5-day in-person design sprints. So far, we've held these in London, Kampala, Beirut, Nairobi, Amman, and Tallinn. At our sprints, we curate superpowered teams of individuals from all around the world and match them up with civil society organizations to co-create data-driven projects that forge real change with lasting impact. Our network spans more than 90 countries, and it includes human rights activists, data researchers, data scientists, journalists, storytellers, hackers, web developers, designers, and more. And it's their voices that we want you to hear because they've been working on really creative projects, really meaningful projects, and they each have a really unique story to tell. This video features just a few stars from the Data for Change network. Saja, a magical graphic designer from Jordan, Zdenek, a Czech origin, London-based web developer extraordinaire, and Joachim, a data superstar based in Tanzania. I'll hand it over to them for their intros.
Hello everyone, my name is Saja Othman. I'm a communication designer from Amman, Jordan. I currently work as head of creative management at the Valve Studio, which I helped co-found 3 years ago, and I attended Data for Change sprint in Amman in 2018. I graduated as a 3D artist and animator, which I still sometimes try to do on the side.
My name is Zdenek. I am a developer based in London, United Kingdom, originally from the Czech Republic, and I have participated in Data for Change sprints in Beirut, Amman, and Nairobi.
Hi, I'm Joachim, based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I consult with the World Bank as a data analyst. I was a participant in 2017 Data for Change sprint hosted in Kampala, Uganda. I love outdoor adventures, including hiking and traveling. Thank you.
Since 2014, Data for Change teams have created more than 50 data-driven projects and campaigns, supporting more than 70 mission-driven organizations to unlock the powerful stories hidden in their dataset. Projects like this one, exploring data from the International Organization for Migration to tell the story of internal displacement in Iraq. And this, which maps crowdsourced data about sexual harassment in Egypt to raise awareness about the issue and start constructive conversations about addressing it. And Here the Blind Spot, an inclusive and accessible approach to combating digital exclusion in Ethiopia, a campaign that includes live performances in primary schools. All of Data for Change's projects share a common purpose, and that's to deliver thoughtful and human-centered solutions to some of the world's most pressing social and political problems. So I've invited Saja, Zdenek, and Joachim to take you on a whirlwind show and tell tour of the projects they've been working on. A data-led in-person workshop experience for girls at risk of early marriage in Jordan and their mothers. A suite of tools driven by more than 80,000 rows of data from the United Nations, helping civil society hold governments to account for their human rights records. A deep dive visual campaign addressing web accessibility in Mozambique.
About the Doll was designed in 2018 for the Arab Women Organization in Jordan to help in their work against child marriage within the rural communities and the Syrian refugees community. They already had access to the audience and were working with them, but needed a new approach to this topic. So we designed a workshop kit for them that they can use in their mothers and daughters workshops to start a conversation on this sensitive topic between the pair that they'd mostly shy away from in other circumstances. The main aspect of this campaign was a storybook that can be read from both directions and tells the circumstances leading to a girl marrying early, as well as the consequences resulting from it. As the pair of mother and daughter read together, they'd arrive together at the middle spread, which points out the decision of marrying her at that age as the root of this whole story and the resulting circumstances and what happened to the girl. The End result is more a moment of reflection and an emotional experience that the mother and daughter share together, and then get to tell each other what they think of this topic and communicate a little about it. The story of the campaign, as well as all the other aspects, infographics, and supportive elements, were all designed based on the data insights we had from the community and the real stories of people who've lived this. We took those and abstracted them as much as we could to create a more basic narrative of what would happen, and create something that would bring the mothers and daughters together and help educate the students on the topic.
With the Uproar tools, we tried to give the human rights activists a set of tools to help them leverage the power of the United Nations in championing their cause, based on the country in which the activists are working and the topic they're interested in, which could be digital freedom or women's rights or something else. We try to recommend them who they should meet in the UN to advocate for their cause, and then also help them prepare for that meeting. So it's like online dating for activists and the diplomacy teams. It's a suite of tools that helps you find the right people to talk to, teaches you about the very specific language United Nations speak, and also provides background information about your country in the context of the United Nations, and also gives you access to the underlying data set that's powering the experience.
The project that I'm going to be talking about was implemented in partnership with a Mozambican nonprofit organization called Mozambique Disabled Persons Organization to promote the digital inclusion of people with disabilities in web-based products and services in Mozambique. The timeline was from November 2020 to January 2021. And the need for this project existed because of information gap and lack of awareness about accessibility or lack thereof of the most useful and popular government and private sector websites in Mozambique to disabled persons. The way we implemented this project was through measuring the accessibility of the most useful and popular government websites, 100 in total, in Mozambique, to determine if they are meeting international standards of web accessibility or not. This was made possible through automated web accessibility testing using Axe Core library.
One of the things that we were talking about loads in our first conversation that I really wanted to pick up on, because it's one of the reasons that we started Data for Change, and I guess it's one of the reasons why this year, in particular with the pandemic, has been like so difficult, because we haven't been able to have like the in-person collaboration that we usually do, is to talk a little bit, because all three of you are involved at the moment in collaborations with Data for Change teams that don't involve any in-person connection, but online collaboration as well. It's just to talk about how like this year has kind of changed what collaboration means, and how we've been able to adapt what things we can't get online that we usually get when we do in-person collaboration, and sort of what adjustments have had to be made.
I think the biggest part was that the whole concept of Part with a Doll was in-person workshops that the mothers and daughters get to actually sit together and talk within a community of other mothers and daughters, and they experience this feeling together. So what we had to do this year was that to look at the project again, which is a project about the whole community, but then we had to kind of work with them individually while still trying to fake this feeling of community, or create this feeling of community when they could not actually be together.
Interesting. And I really like sort of, it's not just about defining like what collaboration might mean. It's about sort of defining what a different approach to community might mean. And if community is kind of at the heart of what we're doing, sort of trying to reshape definitions of that to help us have the same kinds of impact moving forward are really important. Yeah, I wonder, you know, this kind of ties in as well to the saying, this which is really common in the nonprofit world, of nothing about us without us, or the idea of nothing about us without us. And that's always been really central to Data for Change's work. And that's why even at our in-person sprints, the nonprofit organizations that we work with always have a seat at the table.
With our project, once we got all the clearances as far as to what all the individuals are supposed to be working on, it was very easy for the collaboration to take off because, for example, I was involved with the data collection, and I was like communicating a lot with the data journalists in the project, ILA, but also I was talking a lot with FAMODI, the nonprofit, which is the one which is on the ground in Mozambique. So that made it easy for us because we had FAMODI on the ground, which is the NGO which knows the local context that we were supposed to know, so for us to be successful in this project. It was, and it is, still is a good way to do these projects, especially considering the current circumstances that we have. And for me, I think it was a very eye-opening experience. And yes, it is like a new experience, but it also a way for us to like cope with the current situation that we are all in.
Absolutely, and I'm kind of excited to see when things do start to kind of go back to quote unquote normality, how much of this sort of pivot style of working that we've all been forced into, we do actually take back into that, because so much of the data for change network is about this decentralization, geographic distance, and also things around accessibility for different types of passports to different locations. So you know, the potentials offered by online collaboration can actually help us to break down some of those obstacles that have been put in our path. I was going to jump over to Zdenek to talk a little bit about like what the experience was working on the Uproar project, and kind of going from a stage of not knowing about something called the Universal Periodic Review, digesting what that was and why it was important, and kind of trying to come up with a process and a way of making the information that was there more accessible, and how that sort of worked as a developer on the project, just trying to make sort of head and tails of something that was really complex and unwieldy.
Yeah, so I was brand new to all that area of diplomacy and lobbying and United Nations processes. So it took a lot of conversations between you, Bronwen, and me, you trying to teach me what is it all about. But since the tool we were trying to create was for people who also didn't know much about a lot of these areas, in a way it was actually really beneficial that I didn't know much at the beginning, because I had to go through the same process of trying to understand that a very different universe of, you know, United Nations and all that. That helped me to, I think, like understand the metaphors and the mental models that you can use to kind of make that world more understandable. And I think sometimes it might be more difficult if you've been working in the field for a long time, and you know the words and you know the processes. It might be it's actually quite difficult to understand that world from the perspective of someone who, you know, is coming to that area for the first time.
You just brought us around to another really, really important theme, and they are, even though they work in tandem, accessibility and inclusion, they are things that we should think about separately as well as together. And inclusion can work on many different levels. And I would love to hear about how inclusion has been reflected in each of your projects.
Working on this project has been an eye-opener for me. You know, coming into this project, I knew a little bit about accessibility issues, but having to experience those issues and knowing that for a fact there are people who cannot access opportunities simply because they are blind or they cannot hear, I think is very awakening for me, Ronan. I'm just like curious. I wanted to ask Saja this question. The topic of child marriage, I think sometimes it can be a very sensitive topic, especially since sometimes you might have to address like cultural norms which have been in existence for a number of years. So I'm just wondering, how did you go about addressing this matter?
I'd say we went with a very direct, non-judgmental way. So we did not tell them what we think is right. We did not tell them what we think they should feel about this. Because as you said, there's cultural and cultural differences to be considered. There's a lot of religion matters to be concerned with, and people do not take these easily. So if you're trying to tell them this is right and this is wrong, or you should think this, they are more likely to get defensive and refuse to cooperate or even listen. So what we went with was a very straightforward way of showing them that if you do this, these are potential outcomes and you gotta take them with responsibility. Bride with a Doll is a super local project, so we knew exactly the community we were working with. And AW works with two audiences. One is the Syrian refugees and the other is Jordanians. And there's a lot of cultural differences here. And considering these cultural differences was important because we knew that there was a chance that the community would kind of reject something if they felt it was targeted at the other audience and vice versa. So a lot of the work we had to do in terms of inclusion was focused on making sure that whatever we're writing and the story we're building for this project carries to both audiences equally and feels something that they can both relate to. So mothers and daughters with all their generation differences need to relate to this, and at the same time the voice, the dialect, the writing, the choice of words, all of them need to be inclusive enough that all the audiences can actually relate to it and feel that it connects. Otherwise we lose the emotional experience and that loses us the impact we're aiming for.
And I think, sometimes we default to think, okay, we should make an app, or we should make a website, or we should do something. And the case of a Bride with a Doll campaign it very clearly shows that if you understand the context and the audience and the goal and the objective of the project enough, and you kind of design your content and your the actual presentation of the content around that, that the impact can be so much higher than starting with a preconceived idea of how you should go into it.
It also was surprising to us because we went into this a little tentatively because we were worried about the concept and the idea that it must be read from multiple directions, and it needed so much work on the ground from AWO themselves and from their trainers, and it needed actual involvement from the mothers and daughters, and we were really worried about all of this going into the first phase. But seeing the first round of feedback from AWO, and then hearing that other mothers and daughters came requesting to be involved in these, I think there is a lot of potential in the right medium when it works right, when the audience and the medium match correctly, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of talk about this this micro testing. Joachim also raised the point of idea validation. We're talking about testing and refining, and leaving space within a project timeline to kind of pivot if the results come back and show you that you're not on the right track. I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Zdenek.
Yeah, so we spent about 6 months working on the project, and obviously what we couldn't afford to do was to work on something for 5-6 months and then be done with it and realize that we've built the wrong thing. So for that not to happen, we were really lucky that during the work on the project, we were also doing a design sprint in Nairobi with a lot of activists who were actually the target audience for the project, which allowed us to do a lot of user testing in person in Nairobi with the prototypes we had. The prototypes that we've tested had very little in common with the final product, but the essence and the core of the experience was there. And we were trying, to provide that insight that we were aiming for in the final product. So even though those prototypes were really rough and really buggy and not working, they were able to communicate enough of the experience and enough of the core value of the website that we were able to put them in front of real people and see if they actually find it valuable and if they understand how to use it. The thing about having a lot of data and extensive data sets is that they are very overwhelming and it's easy to get lost. So it is important to come up with that guiding principle, and it is important to know what is it you're looking for and what are ideally the kind of insights that would drive some sort of action.
Well, thank you so much for joining the recording session for our group chat. It is kind of an unusual way to participate in the conference, but judging by sort of internet connectivity issues and the fact that actually yesterday Joachim had internet shutdown, so even recording this would have been really difficult. I think that Outliers definitely made the right decision to have all of these talks pre-recorded. And I'm really looking forward to the non-pre-recorded part, which is coming up next, where we'll get to have a conversation with the live audience about some of these projects and on the themes around sort of collaboration, perspectives and impact. And I look forward to hearing what they're curious about and how that ties into the broader conversation we're having. So I'll see you in the live side. Thank you so much.